coffee.
Well, if no one's gonna drink this, maybe I'll just... Ugh, that's terrible. That's...
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I am your host, Patrick Jordan, retired law enforcement officer after 38 years in law enforcement. And I'm also the son of a police officer. So law enforcement's been a big part of my life for my whole life. On this show, we go over a law enforcement related movie or a crime drama. We talk about our own experiences and we talk about what is going on today. And before I get into my show, I really want to talk about the LA Mission. Now, I am on the board of the LA Mission. I work hard to raise money for the LA Mission. The LA Mission is a nonprofit organization in downtown Los Angeles that services Skid Row. Now, Skid Row is probably the highest concentration of homeless people in any urban environment, and it happens to be located right here in Los Angeles, California. I do come to you from the West Coast, from California. And the LA Mission serves over 400,000 meals a year to those people who are living on the streets. They also will, for those who are willing, give them a bed for the night, give them a place to get cleaned up. They supply incredibly some of the most important things for the homeless is clean underwear and clean socks. They'll do anything for that stuff. And then they'll give them some basic medical services. And when they're ready to get off the streets, they'll provide wraparound services. They'll deal with their addiction issues. They'll deal with their mental health issues and other medical issues that they might have. They'll deal with their barriers to getting employment, and they'll reintegrate them back into society. That is like a 6 to 12-month process, depending on the person. They give them cognitive behavioral therapy programs, which is the gold standard if you're going to work hard to get somebody off the streets or to get them to stop to recidivate. Cognitive behavioral therapy programs. You can look those things up and see what I'm talking about. But the LA Mission provides that free of cost to these folks. They are nonprofit. They get no money from government because they have a religious instruction as part of their curriculum. So they need your help. So look up the Los Angeles Mission. It's losangelesmission.org and make a donation of $25, $50, or $100 and help a homeless person on Skid Row out today. It'll make you feel good. I'm going to volunteer down there in a couple of weeks, and after I do, I'll give you another report back on one of my shows. So today's show is a fantastic show. I'll introduce my guest in just a minute, but I wanted to challenge the audience. I wanted to do this show as soon as I heard that Treat Williams had passed away. Treat Williams is the primary actor in the show, Prince of the City. And I remember this movie from a long time ago, and I'll get into it in a little bit. But I want to ask the audience to post in the chat, what is their favorite Treat Williams movie? Now, for me, this is my favorite. He was nominated for an Academy Award for this movie, and I thought he did a fantastic job. So put in the comments what you believe Treat Williams' best movie was, and maybe add a little bit why you think that. But before I get into more of the explanation of the movie, let's bring on our guest. Today, I only have one guest. He is a retired Sergeant Cliff Yates. Cliff worked for over 30 years in law enforcement, both in upstate New York and on the LA County Sheriff's Department, where I met Cliff. Cliff, you're a little bleached out there. Just want to let you know. But Cliff,
see if I can turn down my light a little bit. See if that'll help.
Your light a little bit there. We want to see
How about that? Is that better or no?
Yeah, that's a little better. So anyways, Cliff worked for 30 years in law enforcement, but he also came to LA and he tried his hand at stand-up comedy, did a great job at stand-up comedy. I think he did some minor movie roles as well. But I've had Cliff on before. He adds greatly to the discussion. Unfortunately, I was going to have two guests. I've had Chief Ornelas on in the past. He is from New York City. I would have liked to have him. He also worked narcotics here in LA, but he had to back out in the last minute. I did try to get a couple of NYPD officers on for the show, and they couldn't make it in last minute, but I ended up talking at length about them, about the show and their own experiences at NYPD when this stuff was going on in New York Police Department. And I will pass it on to you during the course of the show. But before I get Cliff's comments on the let me give you a little introduction of the movie. The movie is Prince of the City, and basically the title is how these guys saw themselves. They saw themselves as princes of the city. This movie was released in 1981. It's an American neo-noir crime drama, and it is a true story based upon the experience of Robert Lucy. In this show, it's the name is Daniel Chillo, but Robert Lucy was a narcotics officer in New York who decided to expose corruption, not just in the NYPD, but also in the criminal justice system. He went to the feds, told them a story, and this is what the story is based on. And all of my research into this movie, it said that the movie stuck very closely to reality. So after Lucio did his thing and exposed all these guys, Robert Daley, I think, wrote a book, and this movie was based upon that book. And it did very closely to what happened with Robert Lucy. Now, the thing about Robert Lucy is he was working in the 60s and early 70s in narcotics. It was a little different time in New York. And so I want to give a little background. So, Martin, I sent you a something about corruption in the Gilded Age in New York City. Could you just show that poster real quick? Now, we have to realize, most of us don't understand, but New York City has been, that's the other one, systemic with corruption for a long time. And in this, if you just look at the headline, and New York exposes Gilded Age. Gilded Age is about 1870 to 1890, police scandal and corruption. You go ahead and take that down again. So they've been dealing with corruption for a long time. Now, you guys watch movies. If you remember the movie Gangs of New York. Gangs of New York was about 1860. So you looked at the corruption in the 1860s, goes into the 1870s and 1890s. And in the 1860s, it was Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall went into the 1870s, and Tammany Hall was, you saw it in the movie. It was just, they were just corrupt. That's what was going on. Everybody had their finger in the till. Everybody was making money. It wasn't just the cops. It was the politicians. It was judges. It was everybody. And that's, this is, so when Lucio or Danny Chella talks about cooperating with the feds, and I'll get in a little more detail in a minute, he's talking about an environment that has been systemic in New York City for probably 150 years. Now, one of my great heroes is Teddy Roosevelt. He was president of the United States, and a lot of people probably don't know, but Teddy Roosevelt was an NYPD commissioner. At the time, they had a panel of commissioners, and he was on that panel of commissioners. And he was the first police reformer in NYPD. What he recommended after being on the commission was they actually have an entrance exam for the NYPD at the turn of the last century. So think about that. They didn't even have an entrance exam for one of the largest police departments in the country. You just had to be big, strong, and tall, and you got on, right? So now they expect you to at least pass a basic test. The other thing that Teddy Roosevelt did was, after his experience in the city, he was put on a federal task force after the Grant administration. So I'm giving a lot of this history, right? And they developed the civil service process for the federal government. So what the civil service process is, they took away, whenever you had an elected body, elected group of people come in, they would fire all the other people and then give their friends jobs, right? So there was called the spoil system. And they said, we have to get rid of the spoil system if we want to get rid of corruption, right? And their way of getting rid of the spoil system was having what they call civil service rules. So hiring, you had to pass tests. Promotions, you had to pass tests. And firing, you had to meet a certain standard to fire people. So what that did is it made the civil service safer And they, of course, increased wages. And what that did was it helped to improve government, so you had a lot of less graft and corruption, because you weren't in for 4 years trying to steal as much as you can until the next politician is in. You become part of the civil service team, and you stay there as administrations come and go. And that was the way at the turn of the last century to take graft and corruption out of law enforcement and out of other city government entities, because the road department, all that stuff was corrupt, right? So Teddy Roosevelt was one of the first reformers. I bet you most people didn't know that. Did you know that, Cliff?
I did not even know that he was part of NYPD.
Yeah, they actually have an award that they give out, the Teddy Roosevelt Award, for good administration stuff going on in for the New York Police Department. But that turn of the century was a big effort to weed out corruption. Of course, like I say, it takes multiple generations. So this is the environment that Lucio and all these cops, Serpico and all these cops, end up coming up in, is a systemically corrupt system that is gradually maturing to something that is a lot less corrupt than it was in the past. And in this movie, we have some great, like I said, great actors. We have Treat Williams. We have Jerry Albrock. I think that's how he says his name. Jerry. He was on
Jerry Orbach. Yeah.
Orbach. He played Gus Levy in this movie.
Yeah.
And he was in Law and Order, and I really liked his snippy Law and Order's kind of quips on that show. Was he a comedian as well, Cliff? I don't remember if he was or not.
I don't think so. There is a Jerry Orbach Theater in New York named after him.
So maybe he was just a serious actor.
I think so.
But he's in the movie, and the interesting thing about the backstory here, as I did my research, is this guy Robert Lucy. There was a commission called the Knapp Commission that was going on at the time. It was prompted by a guy named Serpico, who was giving up some information, and another police officer named Duke, I think, who was giving up information. And they formed the Knapp Commission because they realized they had systemic corruption. And they were the ones who encouraged Lucio to come forward. And like I said, I watched this movie probably 35 years ago. I had no idea it was based upon a true story. Cliff, did you watch the movie, and did you like the movie?
I watched it. When I first saw it, I think right after it came out in '81, that was part of the reason I actually applied to New York City. But seeing it later, and even this past week, I found it was a great movie the way it was made, and I love true stories, but kind of depressing. Seeing the suicides related to the story was really dark.
Right. It is, and I can imagine it's a very lonely experience when you decide that you're going to turn against all your friends, because that's ultimately what he did. He said he wasn't going to, but he ultimately had to do that. He had no choice, and everything that and then a lot of people that get prosecuted, and some of them actually commit suicide. I can see that it's very lonely kind of experience for him. But as we're going to find out, that he wasn't a saint himself.
Right.
He was not. The other interesting thing, as I did my research, is Rudolph Giuliani was involved in this case. He was part of the investigative team for the Knapp Commission, which was going on at the time, and that Lucio ended up speaking to or working with. So Rudolph Giuliani was involved, and so it's interesting that it goes so many different places that I was unaware of, and it is one of those things. I think I had you on my show, and I talked about how real life influences the media, right?
Yeah.
And this is real life, and it influenced. It made a great movie. So we got some great acting out of some of the talent on this movie. But the story actually made the movie, because you're wondering, well, what is next? What could happen next? But it was Serpico who convinced Lucio. Let's start with the first scene, Martin, and it's friends. And I guess I should explain the scene, and then I'll talk a little bit about Serpico. So the scene is the very first scene is, he's getting some information from an informant, and which is not unusual, and I'll talk a little about that in a minute. The informant gives him the information, and he gives him some money, and once he gets that information, he now clues in the rest of his folks. He needs to get another piece of information. He gets that from another guy called the King, and then they do a bust. And it's after this bust that these guys are all just sitting around yakking it up and talking about what a great score it was. And it becomes pretty clear that they probably skimmed off the top, right, in this situation. And now the very first thing that you notice in the scene is when he deals with the informant and he gives informant money. Now this is a big part of cleaning up law enforcement, and particularly in narcotics, because actually giving informants money is not unusual. It was something that it went on in LA and a lot of major cities. You have to give what's the incentive for an informant, right? It's either getting time off their sentence, or in this case, it's money. Later on in the movie that you see them give them heroin, which I'll get into in a minute, but informants are a big part of solving crimes. Informants, particularly in narcotics, are a big deal. Hype informants is a big deal. So you're giving them some money, they'll sell their soul to be able to get that next hit or heroin. In this case, it's heroin. So $10 or $20 to get information is worth it. That one of the NYPD coppers says, yeah, we did that all the time, where we gave out of our own pocket. He says, I never gave drugs, but I did give money. And you realized, why would they help you? So you give them a little money, they give you a little information, you go and make the arrest. You'll make the money back on the overtime testifying in the case. And, it made sense, right? But he said, how are you supposed to get it done if you didn't have the ability to do that? Because what's the incentive for these guys? So he does talk about it. And here in the scene, you see him, he gets the information, and now they're calling the team together and they go do this raid, and they end up doing this raid. It ends up being Colombians that they're doing the raid on. So that probably was cocaine that they were taking down. And they, of course, take some of the money. But the issue is how close and how tight these guys are as a team, and how accepted it was at the time. I mean, this was, like I said, something that was going on for a long time. Do you remember this scene, Cliff? And do you have any thoughts on it?
Are you talking about the original scene when he's talking to the informant?
Yeah, they're talking to the informant, and then he goes in and they do the bust, and they're all talking about it, how the camaraderie that is going on, and they clearly took money.
Yeah. It just seemed like, man, it's got to be, I guess it was just accepted. And I don't know, when you're new to a unit like that, I guess the unit probably vets you before you're even accepted into the unit. So maybe they have an inclination that you're going to go along with this. It seems to be the culture, right, of this is how we operate. And if you're a new person, right, I guess this is what we do. I don't know how that kind of goes morally if you're just entering a unit like that, and I don't know how the unit vets somebody like that, because I never had any contact with anybody who had those beliefs.
Right. I did, when I talked to one of the NYPD coppers, he said, very quickly, everybody figures out whether you're somebody that's going to take or not. And
right.
He said somebody approached him about, just giving him charging lower charge than he could charge. If you just do this, I'll make it worth your while. And he said he won't tell. I can't say what he actually did to the guy, but let's just say he wasn't up for being bribed, right? And he says, once you make it very clear that you're not about that, you don't get approached.
Right. Yeah. Right.
You don't get approached. And so you can control your destiny by how you conduct yourself. And this guy ended up going on to work narcotics and homicide. So you could do those things. And this was, he started in the late 70s. So it wasn't that long after this that you can see there was a sea change. If you chose the honest path, you could still have a meaningful career doing some really cool stuff. And he's really proud of his work as a homicide investigator. So you see these guys, they take these crews down, and they're taking them down in this scene here. But then afterwards, they find a lot of money. There's a big smile. There's the money, the pile of money.
Yeah.
And they don't see that they take it, but it's pretty clear afterwards. I mean, they're all getting a haircut. They're getting shaved. They're getting their nails done or whatever. This is not the typical behavior of police officers are just grinding out cases, right? Because somebody's got to pay for all that, and of course they're all getting the great cigars, but it also does talk about the theme Prince of the City. These guys could go anywhere to make their cases. They talked about that. When I did talk to one of my NYPD contacts, he said, "Yeah, we kind of joked, but it was more of a joke. It wasn't a serious thing that we were Prince of the Cities, but." We could go around undercover and do whatever we want. Now, one of the things I noticed in this scene, Cliff, and this is clearly we've matured past this, is they're doing the raid. They don't have any raid jackets on.
No, nothing.
None. Nothing. If you think, and I mean, we've had a lot of tragedies where there was shootings involving police officers working the same case. Now we worked to deconflict those on the West Coast, where everybody talked about what cases they're working, so nobody's working the same case. But these guys had nothing on to indicate that they were police officers, and which is probably consistent with what was going on. They didn't want you to be tipped off. I mean, there are probably a lot of reasons why they didn't do it, but a lot of tragedies can happen when you're not wearing a raid jacket. It doesn't matter what you're working, whether it's narcotics, homicide, gangs, you name it. So that kind of surprised me. They didn't have any. They didn't even have uniforms with them when they hit this one. Lots of times you'll have a uniform there when you take them down.
Exactly.
But they didn't even have that, which really surprised me. So the next step is the Chase Commission. So the Chase Commission is supposed to be it's supposed to be consistent with the Knapp Commission that was going on at the time. The Knapp Commission was a commission that was put together because of Serpico and a guy, I think David Dux or something like that. I can't remember his last name. But this is what this is supposed to be. So here are the prosecutors that are part of this commission, the federal people in New York that are going to try and weed out corruption. And it was actually Serpico that told him to go talk to these guys. And they don't really say that in the movie, but that's what was laid out. Is Serpico told Lucy to go talk to these guys, and in this case, he does. He goes and talks to these guys, and he kind of does it. He's kind of on his own. He's not under indictment. He's not facing the case. They don't have anything on him, but they are going to look at SIU first, the Special Investigative Unit first, because they believe where the money and the dope is where the corruption is. That's where these federal prosecutors look. So he goes and talks to them cold, meaning there's no burning reason for him to go. They have no case on him. And of course, there seems to be this affable exchange. And the thing about this scene, and what was interesting about this scene is Lucy talks about the systemic corruption in New York and how that impacts everything over the next few conversations that he has with this guy, right? And I had to bring up the people who talked him into was a guy named Serpico, which we all know, and Dirks. And they felt that he was the most honest guy in narcotics, which is hard to believe once you get through the movie. And they convinced him to go talk to the U.S. attorney. And Lucio talked to them, but he said he wouldn't work with them unless they could go after the whole system. He didn't agree that law enforcement should be targeted. If you're not going to target the judges, you're not going to target the prosecutors, and you're not going to target the defense attorneys, because they're all involved in this corrupt environment. And to just target the police is just kind of low-hanging fruit. And I think you see some of that today, right? They have conflated what they believe is police abuses as all corrupt, which I think is wrong. Anything they don't like about cops, they call it corruption now. And I think they've conflated that now. But right now, as you see, as we do criminal justice reform, and Cliff, I'm going to want you to talk a little bit about this, they've decided let's just hold cops accountable and let's not hold the system accountable. And you see, that's why you have body-worn cameras. That's why we need transparency with police officers. That's why we need Brady. That's why we need all of this stuff. But in reality, they're just part of a bigger system. And these politicians, it's harder to change the system because you have to make big societal changes to change the system. And they're not ready to do that. So they're just going after what I think is low-hanging fruit, the easy stuff to do, and say cops all bad. Let's just go after the cops instead of addressing the entire system. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and going back to that scene, in my research, I guess that U.S. attorney, it was the first time he said he had a witness come actually to his home, and I guess because they didn't have enough to indict him, like you said. So and he came to him on his own, and I guess they talked through the night, and like you said, his whole vision was to, well, I want to expose the system, and they reference in the movie, I just don't want to go after my partners. I want to, let's focus on, So it's funny how the parallel of both of the prosecutors and Cello, right? They think they're both initiating this with good intentions, right? I want to expose it, and the attorney's like, I'm going to, get to the root of this corruption. And of course, later on, it's like they both have the same they know they went at it with the right intention, but all these dominoes fell when you had all these suicides, and kind of both Cello and the prosecutor like, what have we done? What did we started this ball rolling, and we never thought it would get to this. I mean, we wanted to prosecute these guys. We didn't want to kill them or have them kill themselves, but all these things resulted from it. It's kind of fascinating. But
well, do you think, like, I personally believe that federal prosecutors, FBI, you name it, they're all human beings, right?
right,
And they want to make the big case, and they want to, and then politicians, they want to look like they're doing something, right? And so they characterize corrupt law enforcement as the issue, or brutal law enforcement as the issue. And with the cameras, they can imply whatever they want to imply in terms of the actions of police officers, but
right,
they've decided to target law enforcement as the primary problem with our current criminal justice system, but they don't really address the fact that our politicians put those laws in place that we enforced.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so here I kind of relate that to this movie. Okay, they want to go after corrupt cops, but they know that the system itself is rotten to the core in New York. So these guys. Well, I want to. I'm going to go after the long hanging fruit. I'm going to go after SIU, right? That's where the money's at. We're going to go after them. And they have a case in Pennsylvania where these judges were putting juveniles, were hammering juveniles for minor charges to put them in juvenile facilities, and where they were getting kickbacks from the facilities. That's what the judges were doing.
Yeah.
So the notion that you're just going to go after police officers and you're going to fix the problem without dealing with the core, because the police officers, the thing about corruption is, if you grow up in that and you're trying to find what's the moral clarity and what the right thing to do, but you're being told, well, the ends justify the means, so you get to do this, right? And then pretty soon you kind of lose that, where that line is drawn gets blurred, right? And so it's hard for you. And so they decide, well, let's grab some low hanging fruit, let's prosecute some of these guys, and we're going to say it's all okay. But in reality, the cops are only doing what was acceptable at the time. That's how I saw in this movie. And the cops now are only doing what they were told to do within the boundaries of the law, actually.
Right.
And they're calling them corrupt and racist and things. So for me, that was the parallel. Let's just go after the low-hanging fruit. Let's not really deal with the systemic issues that are in New York, that are corrupt in New York. And I see that in LA. We just had another city councilman indicted for corruption in Los Angeles. So we have 15 city council districts in the city of Los Angeles. In the last 5 years, 4 city councilmen from 4 different council districts have been indicted. And yet we're saying that cops need to wear body-worn cameras. I think politicians need to be wearing body-worn cameras, because this guy, he put his girlfriend on the payroll so that he can give her health benefits for many years. Then he ended divorcing his wife and marrying this woman. And then now she's somehow getting money from a developer. That's what that indictment is. They just prosecuted Mark Ridley Thomas, who was on the Board of Supervisors, then went to the LA City Council. And he was getting money. He was shifting money through USC to a nonprofit so that he can keep his son employed after he was involved in a scandal involving sexual harassment up in the state capitol. And these are the politicians. So what they're going to say is, we got to go after these corrupt cops. But these are the politicians that are saying it. That's why I bring that up. I don't know if you're aware of those indictments, Cliff, but that's what's going on here in LA.
And he was, Thomas was, how many years was he involved in?
Well, he was
LA
in
politics.
State government and went to LA City Council, then went to the Board of Supervisors, then went back to the LA City Council. And I can argue that he did a lot of good work for his community, but he was also grifting. He was stealing money and taking care of his family first. And I'm sure if we dug deep into that, so for me, all cops bad is what I heard over the last 5 years, and he was one of the ones kind of leading that charge. Same with Current Price, is the guy on LA City Council, African American. Same thing. All cops bad. They're all bad, and yet he's ripping off his community. Ridley Thomas is ripping off the community for their family members. Right. This is what's going on. I mean, right now we got Biden, same kind of thing, ripping off the people to enrich their families. That's what was going on in New York. That's what was going on with these police officers. And where are we finding the corruption? We're finding it in the political class right now. And yet
Yeah,
you'll still see it.
man, I
That's where,
agree.
I mean, that's what I
Yeah,
saw in this movie, and I see it going on today. And I think our real problem is that political class level. So
yeah. I think, man, I think we need a whole new system of maybe politicians have to go through a certain civics academy, and they need to be vetted morally, and ethics has got to be like a top priority, and these politicians get into this system where to win you have to play by these rules, and it's just not when you have a supposedly free system that where you can put billions into a campaign and then carpet bomb with ads, and that's kind of what gets people elected. It's God, it just creates the corruption itself.
well, it was somebody very close to me, and I won't say their name because they still got to work in the LA, said to me, he goes, they make it very difficult for you to build stuff, because that's what Jose Wejar was a city councilman, and now this latest council, Current Price, they're getting bribed by developers, right? They make it very
Yeah,
difficult for you
yeah,
to build stuff, and that opens the door or gives a reason for these developers to pay the politicians. So if you actually streamline the process, the permit process, streamline it, it sped it up and made sure everybody was treated fairly in the system, you have less need for a facilitator to pay a facilitator like a city councilman or their staff to get something done, right? And so they incentivize the bribes by making a very inefficient and difficult system to get anything built, and
right,
then
yeah,
they get the money. So I mean, so if you really want to talk about reform, let's start digging into those areas. Let's leave the cops alone. Let's start focus on where the real money and the real corruption is going on, and it's right there, and it's systemic, and it's been going on for a long time. So one of the things I did like about Mr. Lucio and Danny Cello in this movie says, I don't want to just go after cops. I want to go after
yeah.
everybody.
I like that. Hey, can you
Yeah.
do you know in my research, I know like Serpico, the movie came out in 73, this one in 81. How long after Serpico's reign in the department was Cello? Was that just a few years later?
He was actually, they were operating around the same time. Cello
Okay.
was in narcotics in the late 60s and early 70s. So was but Cello
Okay,
was
that's right.
he was doing major crime stuff. I get the sense that Serpico was more of a for the sheriff's department. We had the major narco crews, right? They were taking down the
Yeah,
big guys, and then you had the street guys that were working station level narcotics. And I think that was the difference with Serpico.
that makes sense. It
Um,
seems like for Serpico, from the onset, from like graduating from the academy, he started pushing back on and seeing the corruption from the station level, like you say, as opposed to Cello, who was into a major detective unit. Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
right. Yeah, and there was another guy who did not get a lot. Dirk, Detective Dirk, he did not get a lot of play, but he was. They said that he was probably more instrumental even than Serpico in digging out the corruption on the NYPD. So, let's do a shout out for those guys. I mean, they put their life, they risked their lives to deal with corruption on NYPD. And the two guys I talked to said, "Hey, we're not corrupt, but we were part of a system that was a little different." And so and this brings up the next scene: junkie informants. I mean, it was. I never worked narcotics. I always felt it was just a
Yeah,
dirty
me neither.
assignment.
Yeah,
I
it
did
is.
not want to deal with, the few times where I had to be a uniform and take down shooting galleries. And a shooting gallery is where a bunch of hypes might go to shoot up, and they're probably selling there as well. And most of the ones I dealt with were meth. I didn't really have to deal with heroin stuff, but people, they stop. Yeah, they debase themselves to such a degree. They live in squalid environments. They're just chasing that next high, right? And they will do anything to get it. Men and women are turning tricks to make money. They got sores where they're shooting up. Their veins have collapsed because they've shot up so much. They're shooting between their toes, between their fingernails, because they can't get a good vein on their arm. They're dirty. It's just that's what narcotics is for me. And when they displayed these junkies that were their informants, I think they portrayed that actually very well. The desperation to get a hit, and their willingness to talk. And in this scene, he's got a junkie that calls him at home. junkie informant that calls him home, and he's hurting, and Cello decides to go out. Treat Williams decides to go out to help him get some dope, and he gets some dope from a uniform guy to give to him, and he finds out that it's bad stuff. It's not good stuff. So then he chases down somebody else who's a junkie to try and get some heroin from him, and he ends up beating him up to get the heroin for his main snitch, his main informant. And I had a hard time believing this because I never saw anything like this on the LA County Sheriff's Department. Remember, we're the largest sheriff's department in the country. We deal with a lot of narcotics. We were probably the main player in narcotics in terms of taking big crews down in the 80s and 90s, early 2000s. That's how robust our narcotics bureau was. But I never heard or saw anything like this where you're giving them dope so that they can get high and that they'll eventually give you information. But the way they portrayed this hype was pretty accurate for somebody who is a chronic user. What do you think, Cliff? Did you take down any shooting galleries in your day?
No, and as a matter of fact, as you mentioned, when I was just going to patrol in '87, so the AIDS epidemic was coming into vogue there, and I know my TO took me to where heroin addicts were shooting, and just to educate me. And like you said, they were very willing to talk, and as soon as they knew they weren't going to jail, they would show you where they've recently shot up and what the track marks were and what to look for and the symptoms. But, my training officer, I think I mentioned before in another episode that we made one arrest for under the influence of heroin because my training officer did not want to he was really afraid of getting stuck by a needle. And we had deputies get stuck and, you could get AIDS that way. And there was a lot of fear going on with the arrest of these hypes.
I worked West Hollywood and I worked the hypes. West Hollywood, for those folks around the nation and country don't know, it had a high concentration of gay clubs and gay men who lived in the area. And a lot of the street prostitutes, men, were using meth at the time. That's a big deal in the gay community. But I worked hypes because I also got tired of taking burger reports, right? So the hypes will go and do burglaries to support their habit.
Yes.
So, I got over the fact that, well, if I want to take down these burglars, I got to work hypes. And so I did always work hypes, and I never understood it. I don't know how many I put in jail because at the time, because we didn't have we didn't care about jail overcrowding at the time.
Right.
You take down a hype, you violated a hype, they got an automatic 90 days in jail. And I actually thought I was saving their life, getting them off the street for at least 90 days because that's how bad it was.
Yeah.
But they portrayed this pretty well. And when I was talking to these guys from NYPD, they said, yes, one, it was common for you to come out of your pocket with some money for an informant. That was common. And it was also not as common, but did happen, where you came out of pocket or you gave them some heroin to get them better, it always paid off. You always got good information. So that's where I talk about. So you have a situation where this is acceptable coming out of the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, where you use both your own money and some dope that you might have seen previously to help you. And they portrayed it as helping your informant get a hit to make them feel better because they're sick. And I understand that, but I just, giving them poison to continue to poison themselves doesn't. But I didn't come up in a city that was full of a lot of graft and corruption from the top level all the way through the bottom level. It's hard for me to put that in context. But in the movie and in the stories I heard, they thought they were doing something to help them, and it did ultimately allow them to take down bigger scores, bigger cases. Now I never saw that in LA. I doubt that you saw anything like that, Cliff. But what did you think about the movie? What was going on in the movie?
Yeah, and it sparks a thought in my mind that kind of thing would incubate, it would birth corruption, because you are, you got pressure to make numbers and arrests, so you are legitimately taking your personal money now to put into this. Because out of expediency to make an arrest and to keep your informants coming to that you needed to base your cases on. So you are legitimately taking your own money to facilitate this. So then you legitimately can I need to be paid back. and maybe the station's saying, hey, we don't have any provisions for that. So you make a confiscation. There's $1 million there. Well, I did pay the one informant 100. I paid this other guy 200. So I mean, you're due that. And so all of a sudden you're doing the bookkeeping off the books for your to reimburse yourself for money you actually did use. So that's it's going to really foster corruption.
Yeah, and it's I mean, when it comes to money and drugs, I think there needs to be tight controls. I think we learned our lesson. I know about 20 years ago, we put in policies to more tightly control informant management, right? Because I think we did have guys that would take out of their pocket and give money to informants to get information. That did happen. I think they just wanted to make the big score, and we weren't, I'm not talking about making major cases, but if you got a dealer that had a pound of meth or something like that, that was a big takedown, right? That was a good deal. And so they were willing to do that. And of course you do make it up on overtime. I don't know how much time I spent in court after arrest. It was nothing I ever did, but I do think that it was going on where they gave them money out of pocket to make some of those big arrests. Because when we both joined, now I started working streets in 85. I joined in 83. So I was a couple years before you here in Los Angeles.
I joined December of 83. So I don't know, 221.
Well, 221. But when did you hit the streets?
Oh, not till 87. June of 87.
Yeah. So I was still getting pushed out. We were doing the Olympics in 84. So
that's right.
They were still doing the big push on hiring, and they were still pushing people out. And I still managed to get out in 85 very quick. And then things slowed down dramatically after I got out, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you got stuck in custody for a long time. But the big culture on the sheriff's department at the time was making felony arrests, which included dope, and gun arrests. That was the big deal, right?
Right.
And so you were measured by how productive you were in terms of arrests in those particular areas. They frowned on you making a lot of misdemeanor arrests. I really didn't think much of hype arrests, which is what I ended up focusing on.
Right.
But they focused on the felony arrests and gun arrests. And in reality, if you did work hypes, guess what? You were making felony arrests. It's just a matter of time. You're going to run across a baggie of meth or coke or whatever it is their drug of choice. But you're also going to solve some burglaries, which is why I worked them. And I ended up hating the job, but they made me a burglary detective because I was good at working hypes. I'd much rather work assaults. Do you see him here? Can you pick him out? No, I don't see him here. Okay, case closed. Burgs, man, you're one lead after another, one pawn shop after another. It was a lot of work. But I never gave money out of my pocket to make some score. I figured the best way to do it is just the old-fashioned way. Just work your way up with hypes and get information by you're going to jail for 90 days and they give you some information. You can do it that way too, right? That's the cleaner way to do it. I think that's the way they wanted us to do it.
Yeah.
And that's how I did it. So informant management, in this case, when we're talking about reforms in law enforcement, one area that you should be looking is how do you allow your police officers to deal with informants? It's really, and a police officer might say, well, you're putting more controls in place and it makes it harder for us to make the case. Well, in my opinion, I'm putting controls in place so that you have clear boundaries on how to do your job. I'd much rather make less cases and see you get across the finish line for retirement than give you a kind of a nebulous informant policy. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I wish, and it would go towards, I wish that the held opinion was that, man, police officers are the most honest people. And if you can trust anybody, it's police officers. And I think that's more close to reality than it is to what they portray. Yeah. But, there's the saying, people react to perception, not reality. And they painted this perception of a corrupt systemic cops, which leads to who wants to do that job, which is going to feed itself of not getting high quality people. And I don't know if we're going to recover from it, to tell you the truth, but.
Well, I think one of the reasons why this is a movie about a true story of corrupt cops, right? And a lot of the movies have some level of corruption, but I think it's really entertaining and it gets in, and you see it in the news because it is actually the exception to the rule. Now, if somebody followed me around with the camera when I was working the streets, they'd be pretty bored with me stopping the fourth hype to get, whatever, and take them to jail
Right.
for
Yeah.
under the influence. I mean, that's if you're doing regular police work, it can be pretty boring if you're just grinding out the arrests, right? I mean, because
Correct.
it
Yeah.
isn't a pursuit every time. They don't fight you every time, and if you're doing it right, you're taking people to jail without a lot of conflict and without a lot of drama. But they don't want that. They want the drama. They want the guy that crosses the line. That
Yeah.
makes for the interesting story. I think one of the things, and we've addressed it on previous shows, is when you are you see yourself as the bulwark against the crime, like what's going on right now. You see yourself as the instrument to keep the community safe.
Right.
Sometimes the ends justify the means in their mind. Some people they address that they feel like the ends justify the means. Well, let's see. I got a comment. I can't be corrupt unless you have action figures I want. Okay. Well, I'm not sure what you mean there, Monkey, but yeah, this whole thing, and I remember working some places where some guys, well, Sarge, you have to kind of, work on the edges because the ends justify the means. Look what we're doing. And I say, no, we
Yeah.
operate in rules because we're different than them. And
Right.
if you can't take them down this time, you're going to get them next time because we're not dealing with brain sergeants out there on the
No,
streets.
definitely
They're going to
not.
make
Yeah.
a mistake.
Yeah.
And I'd much rather you lose one case but get them stronger on the next case. Do you kind of agree with that?
I agree. Yeah. I mean, that just has to be, the profession have to be that way. I don't know. Things are bad right now as far as public perception that was painted. Not much changed really with the profession. So after 9/11, we were hailed as heroes. People applauded you as soon as you
Yes.
walked in the room. And now, oh man, you're a cop. And so it's like, wow, man, and it was just painted that way. You could create that.
Now, he was interesting that he also had mob connections. So he's Italian, and so some of his relatives, I think it was a cousin.
Oh yeah,
were
yeah,
in
he
the-
did.
in the mafia. That ended up saving his life down the road. But that does happen, I mean, in New York, where you had the five families, you had there's this cross pollination, particularly Italians. I mean, there was a couple of cops. I forget their name now, but they called them the mob cops, who were involved in murders. And they were later prosecuted long after they retired. But you do have this interaction.
Yeah.
Between law enforcement getting corrupted by the mob, having family relations in the mob. And we've seen that with a lot of different movies involving New York, NYPD, Italian police officers, and the La Cosa Nostra.
Yeah. If when was because I heard him mention this. I heard him mention the French Connection in the movie, and then I just recently saw the French Connection. So was that happening at the same time? That is kind of the same
era. In fact,
heroin supply from France, I guess.
We're gonna get into the movie, but eventually somebody starts ripping off the dope that was seized in the French Connection, and this really starts. The feds focus on the Special Investigation Unit. They're now everybody's game because they were embarrassed by the fact that heroin was being stolen out of the police lockers. And it indicates a lawlessness or a lack of systems and controls and conscience on the part of some police officers and people working SIU. And we see in the movie said, hey, it's none of my people. They're not involved. Well, it was people in the broader Special Investigation Unit that was doing that, right? And it was the mafia that was pushing that. But something else is said in this conversation where he talks about the mafia connected, and I can reflect upon this as he says, hey, you guys are all these, you go to Harvard, you go here. Us cops are the blue collar guys that are stuck living in the system that you created, and that was kind of his theme. And I come from a blue collar family, so I believe in that. I mean, hey, you guys are the movers and shakers. You guys are the policymakers. You pick and choose where you want to enforce at the federal government. You allow things. You elect people. Remember, there are a lot of powerful politicians need New York to get elected to federal office, and so they turn a blind eye to this kind of stuff. You do this stuff, and yet you put a few blue collar cops in
Yeah.
prison, and you clean up the act. You guys control it. You guys allow it to happen. And I actually agree with that. I think that in this movie, in this story, that's 100% accurate. It's they don't hold themselves. If they really were holding themselves to a higher standard, they would have never used Lucio, because they would have realized that he was too corrupt to use as a credible witness. But yet they
Correct.
used him
That's right.
to make,
They would hurt their
do you know what I mean?
case. Yeah.
And they were willing to turn a blind eye to it. So their ends justified their means,
Right.
right? So, but their ends justified the means, because we put a few blue collar cops in jail. Of course, no, he argues they need to be going after lawyers and judges and things like that, and they do eventually do that. But I grew up from a blue collar family. A lot of cops come from blue collar families. I don't know, and I just feel you worked with a lot of guys, Cliff. A lot of guys who were just working class guys, right? That ended up being your
Absolutely.
partners.
Yeah. Yeah. I like you. My dad was a cop and in upstate New York. And so, yeah, I agree. And, it's like you said, there's a parallel between those two. The detectives were willing to take shortcuts to make their cases. And now this assistant DA, like you said, he's picking this guy they know he's tarnished, right? I mean, how are you going to make a good case when your witness is not they're not morally, they're not going to have any, what do you call it? Their testimony is going to be, tainted, because they're not going to be credible witnesses. That's what you were saying. Yeah.
Yeah, he wouldn't get past a Brady violation today. I mean, Brady,
correct. Yeah.
a Brady list because he did so much wrong, and that brings us into the next scene. I did three things, right? And I think as he decides to be an informant, they sit him down and they got to find out, well, just how bad were you and what did you do?
Right.
Because we have to mitigate those things to ensure that you are somebody that worth taking a risk on and building cases on. And he acknowledges three things that he says he's done. And it's pretty clear, even they didn't believe him. You could tell they didn't necessarily believe him at the time, that after 11 years on the police department, many of them in narcotics, that he only had done three things. But they ignore that. They ignore the obvious, which is a problem for me, because that, like I said, that means to them the ends justify the means, right? And so they take testimony from him as he talks about these three things. But in reality, I think we all know, and the movie implies it, and it later comes out that it was a lot more than just three things. But they take that testimony from him, and he starts to wear a wire. And one of the first cases he actually starts working in is getting a defense attorney that was ginning up evidence to get their dope dealers off, right? So he says he wants to go after the whole system, and one of their first targets is they call him Bloomberg, but he's a defense attorney that works for the major narcotics dealers, and he would suborn perjury by getting witnesses to say that no, that guy wasn't there, he was at my house, to create doubt in the case, and then the person would get off. And of course, I'm sure everybody knew what was going on as this guy suborned perjury.
Yeah.
But this is the very first case he's talking about. So here in this scene, he's actually talking about what he did, his three things. And just, Martin, when you're done with that one, go ahead and start rolling into, if we have time, Wired with Bloomberg. But
no, in fact, we're going to have to pause this because we have 3 minutes for break.
Okay. Well, let me finish up the thought, or I got to cut off now, or can I finish the thought on this?
No,
go ahead. Okay.
Go ahead.
So he decides he's going to go. The very first biggest target is a defense attorney who is ginning up evidence, and I never saw that, where we had defense attorneys bring in people who they knowingly that they knew were lying. I think they might have. I just never saw that. And I was in Beverly Hills. We were in Beverly Hills court, so you had a lot of defense attorneys with a lot of money. But it just indicates just how corrupt the system was, that this was widespread at the time. What do you think?
Yeah, it's I mean, as officers, you saw attorneys doing things that, just they weren't morally correct. So they had their own brand of corruption that was going on within the system of criminal justice. Yeah, I agree.
And I don't know, where were you going to court when you were making your arrest? Was it Compton Court or?
Originally, it was Compton, my first assignment, which they called the Siberia of the criminal justice system. That's what the attorneys would say. Yeah.
They were just hustling, a lot of hustling cases. When I was at Beverly Hills Court, you ended up with a lot of private attorneys. So it was different, because I eventually ended up down in Compton Court and some other courts, working other
Yeah.
stations, and it was a different kind of policing, because when people had money, and you were going to face a private attorney in court, you better read your report, you better be on your toes, and ready to go. So, but in this case, Lucio or Treat Williams decides the very first person he's going to take down is a defense attorney who is suborning perjury for his clients to get them off. And these guys are excited, because they want to get him. These federal prosecutors, they want to get this attorney because he's, it's kind of like I guess what's the case of the officer that always got off? They call him the Teflon Don. I can't think of his name right now, but clearly he was suborning perjury. He was corrupting juries to get off. And of course, that if you do a lot of work to put a dealer behind jail and then they just bring in these witnesses who are lying, that frustrates you. So you really want to get that guy who's willing to do that. One, he crosses the ethical boundaries in the legal profession, but also he's disrupting your cases. So
Correct.
Lucio does stick true to going after somebody other than cops initially.
That's right. Yeah. True.
Initially. So, Martine, are we ready for our break? And we go and do that now, and then we'll go into
Okay.
this. Okay. Here we go.
Hi guys, this is Gary from Pop Culture Minefield here on KGRA, and we're leaving for our first break. I hope we survive.
Did you know 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated? If you struggle with focus, run low on energy, or when it's time to finally sleep, you simply can't, this can all be linked to dehydration, and Fuel Up has the answer. Our proprietary formula contains the finest cellular hydration with the strongest immune-enhancing natural ingredients. The Fuel Up system is made up of 3 different, incredibly tasting varieties. Wake kickstarts your day with a jolt of caffeine. Play boosts focus while hydrating your cells. Rest not only helps you relax, but also rejuvenates your cells while you sleep. Here's what our clients have to say.
I really don't miss my coffee, and you can tell the difference.
So I'm going to take it for the energy. I'm going to take it for the play. I'm going to take it, all day.
And it works. That's the thing. It works. We love it.
Take the Fuel Up Challenge now, where we offer a Feel the Difference money-back guarantee. Fuel Up for life.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Oh wow, we survived. Welcome back to the commercial break. Now for some more Pop Culture Minefield on KGRA.
Well, hello. Welcome back to Morning Coffee with the Chief. Today we are reviewing the movie Prince of the City. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Cliff Yates, as we talk about this movie. But before we get back to the movie, I want to remind everybody, if you like the show, please hit the like button. If you're not a subscriber, subscribe to Pop Culture Minefield on YouTube. If you're listening to us on Rumble, be sure to follow us on the KGRA channel on Rumble, and of course like the video there. And regardless of what platform you're following us, share it with a friend. Let's get our name out there, and also make some comments. You can also listen to the show on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Just download their app and you can listen to it anytime. You can go back actually and listen to some previous shows. You can also do that on Pop Culture Minefield. I would interest you, if there are some subjects you are interested in, if you actually look at the episodes, it brings out certain subjects. So if post-traumatic stress disorder is one of those subjects you're interested in, you can watch my Onion Field show. We talk deeply about that. If you want to talk about undercover work, you can listen to the Training Day with Denzel Washington. I had an expert on doing undercover work on that show. So you can go back and then the other one, High Noon. It was a great show. I had a couple guys and we talked about the abandonment of law enforcement by the political class. And High Noon, you saw that with Marshall Kane as well. So if you're interested in certain subjects, you can go back and watch my shows and make up your own mind about that stuff. You can still comment, of course, on those shows as well. I think we got a comment here. You have to learn to ignore the things that don't matter. Many things that they taught you to worry about are not relevant, and look at the statistics. It doesn't happen in the world. It doesn't matter. I'm not sure what you're meaning by that. Maybe that was a comment from the movie, but one of the things that seems to be a theme in a lot of these movies is ignore what was taught to you in the academy. That's all, BS. They don't know what they're talking about. Well, I personally think the things that are taught in the academy and training as you go on in your career, I know it saved my life at one time that I stuck to the tactics that were taught to me. I didn't cut corners. The very first time I actually approached a couple of dope dealers on my own, I was on training. They were lining up to shoot the guy who came to the driver's door. I mean, they were sitting and I remember the street. It was DeLongpre, and it was a Datsun B210. And my training officer said, I want to see you approach the car. Well, I was the bookman, which means I was the passenger guy. And I decided to approach the car outside of the beam of light. It was at nighttime, right? And I followed all the rules that I learned in the academy. And they were waiting. They were both looking out the driver's door window. They were waiting for whoever came up to that driver's door, and they were going to shoot whoever came up, right? We had a lot of one-person cars, one deputy cars, so they assumed I was by myself. But I approached on the passenger side, and I thought it was really odd. They were looking intently out the driver's window. I pulled my trusty 38 wheel gun at the time. That's what we carried. I said, let me see your hands. And I hear a big thunk. Browning automatic hit the floorboards. They were waiting to shoot me.
Yeah.
And they were dope dealers, So as we talk about this movie here, let's keep in mind, this is a dangerous game that these guys are involved in. These guys will kill to keep their money. They will kill to keep their dope. Or they'll try and bribe you one way or the other. But when they're desperate, they'll do what they think they can get away. And both those guys were white guys. They had an 8-ball of coke in the back. They were all sucked up, so they had been chronically using their product as well. And narcotics is a dangerous game. It's really a dangerous game. But I followed all the rules tactically, and I tell that story every now. I don't know if I ever told you that story, Cliff, but first time somebody tried to kill me that I know of was that day.
Wow.
So
yeah.
I believe in following the rules or following.
Definitely. Yeah.
So so when they say just ignore what I say, no, that for me just reinforced. They know what they're talking about when they teach the stuff in the academy. There's a reason why they teach it, and I try to understand those reasons and follow it. I never really believed in the whole notion the ends justify the means. You tried to stick with how you were taught, because if once you get off that slippery slope of, well, it's okay this time because, and then pretty soon you keep going a little further and you don't know. So what do you think of that, Cliff?
Yeah, I agree. I of course, when I started in upstate New York, and it was reinforced when I get to LA how bad my tactics were. And at one time I had come out of a restaurant, and earlier I had arrested a drunk driver, and he had come to shoot me when I came out of the restaurant. So, but he fell asleep in the truck, because I was in the restaurant too long. But then, but I knew that he had come back to his truck. So I went to call the judge at the time, and then the guy ended up driving past me. And then I pulled him over again, and that time I had backup come and assist me. And while I was arresting him for the second time, then they told me that he had a loaded shotgun underneath the front seat. And then later on, it came to be that we came to learn that he'd come to shoot me. But after that, I ended up going to a street survival seminar put on by California Press at the time, and boy, it really affected my self-awareness, and it was reinforced with the LA Sheriff's Academy. So, like you, I still carry those tactics today, being self-aware of my surroundings just by habit.
And that was just a drunk driver arrest? Was you arrested for drunk driving? He was mad at you. He had a grudge, and it was
a drunk driver arrest where I chased him into a field. And at the time, it's kind of reflected in the movie compared to LA, where we have a bail schedule. In New York, as it shows in the movie, you have to arraign every prisoner. So I had to take him before a judge or a justice of the peace at this time. and the judge let him go to his mother instead of putting him in jail. And so that's why. So she took him home supposedly to take control of him. I'm at breakfast. He got out of his mother's care and got his loaded shotgun and came looking for me where he knew I might be. And so that's how that whole thing came to be. But yeah.
Well, I don't believe every time I hear that movie, I go, you know what? I never believe that. So, but anyways, back to the movie. So he decides to work with these guys, and he decides to wear a wire. They're focusing on this corrupt attorney and also a corrupt bail bondsman, right? And bail bondsman is played by this big burly guy. I forget his name.
I forgot.
And he's wearing a wire on this guy, and he gets connected with this guy through another police officer, right? And
Right.
the whole idea is, they have the indictment on Bloomberg. I believe that's what the case was, and they wanted a copy of the indictment, right? They wanted to see what they had on the attorney, and they were willing to pay for it. And the conduit for getting that was this police officer and this bail bondsman. Now, they also had another thing going through a friend of his called Rocco, and I think you remember he's a big burly guy that was, I'm not going to kill you, Danny. You don't have to worry about me. Jail's nothing to me, right? But
that's
same
right.
thing.
Yeah.
You remember that part?
Yeah.
And so another corrupt cop wanted to sell an indictment, and it's like, so the cop gets the transcripts and the indictment, but it's also coming from somebody else who gets a piece of the action down the line. So it's not just these cops getting it. Everybody's feeding at the trough, right? Everybody's getting the piece of the action.
Yeah.
That's where Lucio's talking about, or Daniel Cello's talking about, where the whole system is corrupt because everybody's involved in this, right? So in this case, this defense attorney who represents these high-level narcotics defendants, he's the target now, and he wants information. What do they have on me? And he's willing to go through this bail bondsman to get it. Now, the problem with that is they realize that somebody's talking to the feds.
Right. They know.
The Knapp Commission's going on. It's in the newspapers. It's on TV, and they don't know who to trust, right?
Right.
And they're saying you can't trust Cello, and Cello just kind of makes a joke of it. And these guys aren't so sure, right? And they're just not so sure. And information starts leaking out that the informant's first name begins with a D. You remember this?
That's right. Yeah. And that's when he got jammed up right after that. Yeah, by
very thin information. Could you imagine? I mean, David. It could be Daniel. It could be. I mean, it could be any D name, right? And Danny. I mean, this guy's name is Robert, right? So I mean, the first guy, but it begins with a D, right? So they decide it's probably him. And they're going to clip him, right?
That's right. Yeah, they were.
They want to kill him. And the interesting thing, and they talk about it in the movie, is they do try to kill him. They take him from this restaurant. They're going to take him somewhere and kill him. And they're discussing, well, who's going to shoot him? Well, he's one of you, like this other cop that's in this scene here. He's one of you. You're going to do it. No, you're going to. I can't kill a cop. You're going to do it. So they're talking about.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about this movie and this character, and I believe it's true, is Danny Cello stopped carrying his gun.
Yeah.
On him. He kept it in his briefcase.
Yeah.
And I think they were right in saying that he kept it in his briefcase because he felt guilty about what he was doing.
Yeah.
He felt guilty that he was doing it. I don't know why he would feel guilty with these guys, but he felt guilty that he was betraying, I guess, the system and these police officers. And so he stopped carrying his gun, and that would be justice if he was killed, I guess. You have to believe when you're going in this that you're going to be a target and a target for murder, but he stopped carrying his gun because he didn't necessarily. I think it was a lack of self-respect for himself, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, so he's building this case on this guy. They find out that the informant has his name begins with a D. Our character's name here is Danny Cello. So they decide that they're going to kill him. In this scene, they're talking about wearing a wire. He does wear a wire on this guy. He wears it, as he talks about, in his groin area, not on his chest area, because he meets with them and they're checking him for a wire later on in the scene. But they decide they're going to kill him. And here's the interesting part about this is they go to take him out and kill him. And he says, well, why don't you take me over to where his cousin's at? and you can talk to him, and you're gonna see that I'm okay, right? I'm okay. And he does, and they do that. They take him over to where his cousin is at, and his cousin basically, here we are. So his cousin doesn't necessarily say, "Don't kill him. He's okay." You remember what he said? His cousin said,
Yeah.
"Well, if he is a rat, then go ahead and kill him. But
if you're not sure, there's too many people that
like
are on
him."
his side. Yeah. So actually, his mob connection saves his life there.
Yeah, and that's so here they are. They're working with Danny to put mobsters because mobsters are corrupting the system. So they're going from the people who are causing the corruption, the people who are engaging in the corruption, all the way they're doing everybody here. So they want to take down big level mobsters as well. And it was the mobster who actually saved his life, and later in the movie he actually pays with his life. But this is where they're taking him. So he almost gets clipped by these guys, and these guys. This is okay. You are connected. The only thing I have on you is the informant's name begins with a D. Just think about how thin information they were willing to work on. That's how afraid they were to have an informant in their midst. What do you think about this scene, Cliff?
Yeah, like you said, I think it's man, his mob connection saved him. That's how, so then the mob guy, like you said, he didn't come right out and say, "Hey, he's good to go. You can trust him." He said, "Well, if you really believe if he's you can kill him, but if you're not sure, there's too many people that like this guy, and it might be a bad move." And so based on that, they decide, we're not killing him.
Right. And when you listen to the comedy, you think about it. He is not saying don't kill him. He's saying do what you got to do, but if you're wrong, there's real consequences.
I'll tell you a true story without giving too many details because it probably doesn't bode well to but a friend of mine who he was applying to be a police officer in a small town in New York, and he had gone to a funeral of a mob guy that was a relative of his in New York. And so in the picture of the paper of the funeral, my buddies was in there as one of the pallbearers, right? So this little tiny town, the guy told my friend, he goes, hey, Tom, I can't hire you because, your picture was in the paper of this mob funeral. So, I wanted to hire you, but based on this, I can't, And so my buddy said, "Hey, you do what you want to do, but all I'm going to say is I can't guarantee your safety." Anyways, guess what? They hired him. They hired him.
Did they hire him? Oh,
they hired him. Yeah.
But that only just reinforces the interplay between La Costa Nostra and the Italian.
Absolutely, man.
Some blood relatives that go into law enforcement, and just to be clear, I mean, there's this old story, and I can't remember the name of the guy, but it was lieutenant on NYPD, and it was before the turn of the century. I forget his name, and he was really working hard. He was an Italian guy to work out corruption in the NYPD, and I believe, if I remember the story correctly, he actually went over to Italy to work with the Italians, and he ended up being murdered. I can't remember his name, and I'll have to do the research on that next time we do one of these movies.
I can't remember it. Well, interesting. This movie, trivia wise, it was it's only the second movie that was actually a big Hollywood film that was filmed in all 5 boroughs of New York, except for The Godfather. And so, because I studied all those 5 New York crime families that were responsible for all the 5 boroughs: the Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, Colombo, Bananas, and man, I was just fascinated with the mafia culture at the time.
Well, obviously, beyond doing movies on corrupt police officers, I think the mafia genre has generated a great many entertaining movies, right? Goodfellas, obviously, Godfather 1, 2, and 3, and just a lot of great, and a lot of that is based upon true stories. And they actually use mobsters in the movies, and I mean the Sopranos.
Yeah, Sopranos use a lot. Yeah,
that was based upon I forget the name of the family up in New Jersey, but it was based upon true story and what was going on at the time.
Yeah, and I looked up some trivia. Let me know if you looked this up. So apparently, Sidney Lumet, the director, as an ode to The Godfather, there's a scene in this movie, Prince of the City, where a garbage truck pulls up, and on the side of the garbage truck it says Coppola Brothers, as an ode to Francis Coppola and The Godfather. But I hadn't seen that, but in my research I found that out.
Well, it's pretty interesting. That's probably the garbage truck that you know, the mobster, what's his Nick, I think his name is, he ends up in there. His cousin ends up being killed, right? They're getting ready to dump the trash in the dump truck, and then you see him.
That's right. Yeah.
You see him in the trash can. So here we are. We're finished up the scene where he's say, hey, no hard feelings. They almost clipped him. No hard feelings. Now you can tell he's kind of angry here because he almost got clipped, and he's scared.
Right.
And now he's also mad because he feels like the marshals or the FBI agents who were his cover didn't know what they're doing, and he wanted NYPD guys,
right,
to be his backup. I think if they knew what he was doing, that a lot of them really wouldn't want to be involved. Even if they were honest guys, they wouldn't want to be involved.
That was a paradox, right? He wants his own guys he's kind of turning against to be the guard.
And you know, I've been to Manhattan a few times. It would be difficult to get around if you're just in a car doing this monitoring, but that's where you had to have the recording equipment. This goes to show you that the older equipment had its limitations. Nowadays, it's not a big deal. I mean, you can be on foot following a guy. You don't have to be in a car. You can listen very easily because everything's so much smaller. So we got a comment here. That's clever because organized crime has legit businesses in garbage and construction. That's very true.
Yeah, really, it is. Yeah,
it's very true, particularly in New York. Yeah. That's very true.
I would say it's globally. That's the reason why nobody can buy a house. They use the construction business as a
correct
laundry. It's a laundry scheme. That's why all the prices went to the roof.
Yeah, not just the mafia, but in this case, as I just talked about earlier in the show, in LA, it was developers that are bribing some of these guys. They just want to get their buildings built. If they made it easier and getting there, so you created an inefficient process of developers bribe you so you and your family can get rich. And what's the net outcome? Not enough housing. A lot of homeless people. Our policies are a big part of why we're here. So, anyways, Danny Cello decides that he's gonna. He's gonna. Well, he gets leveraged into working against a friend of his. I forget the name of the detective's name, but he's got a close friend who was. They use the word Rabbi. He was my rabbi, which is kind of an.
It wasn't Levy, right? Was it Levy's character?
No, it wasn't Levy, but it's kind of. Rabbi is kind of an endearing term for somebody that's helped you.
Teacher
along the way. A teacher. I mean, just a friend of ours passed away recently, and from my class, and I'll probably go to his funeral, but somebody said, he was kind of my rabbi through the academy, helped me through the academy. And I didn't associate with the guy very much on the department, but he is a guy named Ponce, who's a good guy. But a friend of mine said, he was kind of my rabbi, helped me told me how he had been in the military, told me how to get through the academy because I wasn't in all this paramilitary stuff, and he managed to get through the academy. So we even used the term out here. I've never really used it, but I've heard it used a lot. He's my rabbi. I haven't heard, hey, he's my dad. He's helped train me, kind of thing. But so this is his rabbi, somebody who helped break him in, somebody helped teach him the ropes, and he's compelled. And this is suicide is the next scene. He's compelled with a strong-headed prosecutor to go after his friend. And what happens is he doesn't tell Giannicello, but he says he wants this guy. I think his name's Mario. He wants Mario, and to get him, he needs to take down a mobster, Sardino. So somebody from Italy who's under indictment or working with the feds. Now, Cello doesn't know he's working with the feds. He works really hard to find him, and they tell him, we want you to take down your partner. And he says he won't do it, but he does help him build a case against Sardino, which they've already got him in the pocket anyways. And they go after Mario. And it's interesting in this scene because what's going on in this scene is he's saying, hey, I need to get out of New York. I need my passport. I'll give you information on a big score and you can take him down and maybe get some money. And so, but he get my passport, and this detective says, "Yeah, I'll do that. I'll get it for you." And he hands out his bribe, and the detective is hesitant to take it. Right.
Right. Yeah.
He's hesitant. He knows something's up, but
he has a sense that something's wrong here. Yeah.
He senses something. It's Gino is his name. So Gino
Yep.
senses something is wrong, and he doesn't want to take the money right away. And in the end, he did take the money, which then completes the transaction. So he's selling. He's gonna get information by giving this guy a passport, or so he can get out of town, and that's their business. So basically, that's the bribe, and Gino gets taken out as he leaves the restaurant.
Right.
And then they now they start putting the pressure on Gino later, and he ends up committing suicide. And they do talk about, as they're going through this process, at least a couple of police officers committed suicide.
Yeah.
In this case, and whether it's the shame or the thought of going to prison, I'm not sure what it is. But here you are, you're the big man in the city, you're a prince of the city, you're all over town, you're highly respected, and now you're going to prison, right? And they weren't, I mean, the prosecutor in this case is a little short guy. He was, what did he say to him? He goes, "Hey, you're just a thief like everybody else." There was no, let's talk about the gray area. Hit this guy right here. You just kind of cross the gray. No, you're a thief. You're a crook. You're like everybody else. You've done nothing good. You're going to jail. We want you to get Alvarez, your partner, on the phone so we can get him too. And
when they went after this guy, and and Cello says, "Hey, no, you can't go after Gino." And then that little guy there from Washington, he turned to the assistant attorney. He goes, "What was the deal, right? No partners. Gino's not your partner, right? Okay, he's going down."
Yeah.
So they turned his own, and then he's kind of in their presence, right, when he commits suicide. And this little guy kind of tells him, "Gino, hey man, everybody looks up to you. Guess what? You're going to be the perp walk. We're going to walk you in, and everybody's going to say, look at Gino. He was the top guy. Now you're going down." And that kind of, I think in his own mind, he says, "That ain't happening. I'm going to take myself out right here."
Yeah, and this guy, when he originally talked to Cello, he was, he's thinking he wants to take some big mafiosos down. No, this guy's game was always going after the corrupt cops. The guy, the Fed. He was always going after the corrupt, and he kind of, he fits. For me, he fits. He talked about the blue collar nexus, and I'm just working in a corrupt system that you created. To me, he fits that that typical. Went to Harvard, Yale, whatever. Mom and dad had money, and now I'm crusading to take all these corrupt people down. But I'm at the top of the pecking order, right? I'm, when I talk about, when I talked about the Gilded Age, right, 1870 through 1890, they talked about it was one of the times when the imbalance of wealth was so great. The top 20% had most of the wealth. And that was why they called it the Gilded Age. It was Gilded Age for a few, not for the many, right?
Correct, yeah.
And if you look at the 70s, you look at the late 70s, early 70s, mid 70s, and into the late 70s, that was, New York City was on its knees financially.
Right.
The rich people were doing fine, but everybody else was poor. And that's the context that we're talking about, this corruption. So these cops are working for a city where there's not a lot of money. There's not a lot of pay for them. And they're corrupted, and everybody else in the city is getting corrupted. And then you got this little short guy that's, I'm going to do the right thing. Well, you know what? Let me ask a question. If you were in those circumstances, so this is a question for you, Rick, this for you, Cliff. If you grew up in the circumstances of blue collar, if you grew up in, this corruption, and not Harvard and going to the prep schools, you're going to be a little more susceptible to this stuff, because that's the environment you grow up in, not some, going away to boarding schools and playing. Well, this guy probably didn't play any sports, looking at him, but you're not going to play any lacrosse or whatever they do, or the rowing team. When you grow up blue collar, or you grow up a hard scrabbled life, sometimes your view of the world's a little different, right?
There's a family scene. I don't know if you're going to get into it, right? Where he's, and then his cousin or brother or whoever who's a doper, and they're at the family get together, and they're saying, you're a cop. You don't look at these suits you're wearing, your Rolex, and you're dirty. You're pointing the finger at me, and all you guys are all corrupt because you're wearing all these $high suits, and this isn't what your pay reflects, and it kind of went to that.
I remember that scene. That was early on. That was his brother who was using.
His brother, correct. Was a
right,
doper,
and was using. And so when I see these guys from DC who grew up and everything was handed to them their whole life, all they had to do was study to get in school. They got the best schools. I mean, they could sleep through class and still have opportunities because of the names that they had, and they get these opportunities. And you think of like Rockefeller. He was a big anti-crime guy. I forget his first name, but you get a lot of these. Even I love Teddy Roosevelt, but Roosevelt came from wealth and money. So it's easy for him to look down and say, well, we need to clean this up. I think he genuinely understood that it was a different life, but some of these guys are just so arrogant that could you have survived it without getting a little splash of dirt on you?
Yeah.
And they never have to answer that question because it wasn't their reality, right? But they are
Right.
good at
That's
they're
right.
pretty good at judging everybody else. And so, anyways, they get Gino, and the thing about this, he does commit suicide. And it's like, you guys didn't search him.
I know. Yeah.
How did he get a gun? You guys didn't search him.
Exactly.
So he obviously had a second gun, which is not unusual. I carried 2 guns for a long time when I was the deputy. I think you probably did too. And I had a pocket gun. I never did the whole ankle holster thing. That never worked for me because I was willing to chase suspects, and have a weight on your leg just didn't work for me. So I carried a pocket holster with a second gun. So the fact that they didn't search him, so I don't know the context of how the guy committed suicide in real life. But in the scene, it's like, what?
Yeah.
Who patted this guy down? I mean, I would probably have that guy up on charges, right? But so he does commit suicide, and you just talk about that officer safety issue and that lapse of ability on the Fed's parts to even search him properly.
Well, we used to always see, I don't know if you had the experience of kind of assisting the Feds on some takedowns, and we were always aghast at their tactics, or walking up to the door and just knocking, for bank robbers, and thinking, these guys don't have any concept of getting shot through the door. So I could see how that happening. This guy is really removed, this DC guy, and so I could see where that would happen. Hey, we're just bring this guy into the hotel room to talk to him because maybe we'll turn him. He probably had no concept that this guy would shoot himself, and that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I did work with Feds, and if they were coming out and they were not a tactical team, if they're an investigative team and they were going to do something, I would say, hey, I'd try to assess where they were at. And if I didn't think they had the tactical skills, I said, how about we do the door knock and do the come out stuff? You're just right there, he's yours, let us do it, because I never wanted anybody get shot on my watch.
Not.
And so if I felt I had more tactically capable people, and I did at Century Station, Compton Station, there were some really squared away guys. We handled the door knock to get the people to come out for them, and a lot of them, they were okay with that. They said, you know what? I say, hey, we do this every day. Let us do this, okay? But so the next scene, so I think this thing in Gino ends up transitioning to him having, getting closer to the partners is going to happen, and he does meet his partners here. They're talking about stuff, and he eventually tells them in this scene what's going on, that he is cooperating, but he's never gonna take any of them down. They're all safe. Now, if I'm one of these guys, because I would never be one of these guys because I wouldn't be corrupt, but I'm thinking to myself, okay, I got limited time here. It's going to happen. There's no way that they're going to put him on the stand without delving, because these are investigators. They know what's going to happen. They know
goes,
the game,
man.
right?
Yeah.
And even his wife is saying, you're going to eventually have to turn on your partners. She's saying, are you sure you want to do this through the whole movie?
She knew from the beginning. You can't.
Yes, from the very beginning, she knew it was not a good idea.
You're going to have to turn on your partners. Yeah, she knew it.
Right. She knew it, and he, for whatever reason, he thought he could get it. But that was a deal that he wouldn't have to take down his partners. But of course, we're going to see that their time is. They have limited time. They're going to be taken down, and one of them ends up killing himself. But this is the scene where he finally tells them what he's doing. And it wasn't long after this that his name popped up in the papers, right?
Yeah,
so
he got.
You remember that?
He got outed, man.
So these guys are talking to him, and his name ends up getting the newspaper, and then wearing the wires are over with, right? But it's interesting because what motivated him to tell these guys? Obviously, there's probably rumors going on. I don't know if I would have said anything in my opinion.
I think Gino's deal gave him like a cover, like, hey, look at it. Gino could have been cooperating, or there's other people. Now, my limited involvement's not going to hurt you guys.
Yeah, I would have thought he'd said, you know what, I've done enough with Gino's death. Let's wrap up our cases. I'm not interested in work. I don't want to be part of anybody else killing themselves, And what are the feds going to do? You got a bunch of good cases. Let's just roll with what we have. But he continued work with them. It's hard to say, what his motivation is. I guess I'll have to read the book itself, Prince of the City. Is it just because I want to clean up my department, my city, or is it, I want to save myself?
Yeah, maybe there's more detail in the book. However, it reminded me of something else. I guess Sidney Lumet, he demanded two things to direct it. He goes, I want an unknown actor to play the lead role of Cello, which I guess Treat Williams was unknown at the time, and it has to be 3 hours long. But I guess they did cut it down to 2 hours and 47 minutes, but pretty close to 3 hours.
Well, I did read that, and that was interesting. He didn't want to have to unpack the baggage of a big name star's other movies, right? He wanted just somebody. And I really like, one of the things I like about Treat Williams is he shows the emotion of everything he's doing. Each step is eating at him. What does he say? His gums are bleeding, whatever. It's eating at him. Everything he's known, he's turning on. And I think he ultimately knows he's going to have to give up his friends. He lost Gino, his rabbi, and he was part of that. Whether he likes it or not, he was part of that. Gino killing himself, and he knows that these things are going to. This is going to be the net result. That some of these guys' lives are going to be completely destroyed, or most of them, and some of them might actually take their own life. And what motivates him, I still don't understand what motivates him. Tell him maybe, hey, if you can clean up your act and get out of get out of narcotics, wherever you're at. And they're all, and here's the other, when you go back to the beginning of the movie, he wants to work with them, but he won't take on any of his partners. However, the prosecutor said that's okay because their rotations are almost up. All of your rotations are up in SIU. And what they told me was they had put a rotation system in place in their major narcotics units to avoid corruption. Apparently it didn't work. No. But they were all rotating out. And the other thing, one of the NYPD coppers told me was these guys, they didn't answer to anybody. That's one of the reasons why they call them princes of the city. They answered directly to the chief. Their job was to take down major scores. And here's where I have a problem with the chief, right? The chief has to know. I mean, we're not stupid. They're not stupid. They have to know that these guys are cutting corners, and they have to know that some of these guys are corrupt. But he's happy with that big arrest. Does that, I remember when we had our own scandal, Arco Narco, they loved the fact that they were taking down the money. They loved the fact they were taking down these big scores. I don't believe the sheriff would have tolerated corruption, but he did enjoy standing in front of, 2,000 pounds of this and, $6 million of money seized and taking those photo ops. And I think the chief of NYPD and probably the mayor at the time, they enjoyed those things. So I just get the sense they turn a blind eye to this stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I can see that happening. I mean, my experience, this wasn't corruption, but I mean, when I was in the recruitment unit, they reported right to the person who was heading the unit, and he went right. So the captain of the personnel who was over recruitment unit, my head would just go right to the sheriff, and then he would get his decision. Then he would tell the person head of the division, hey, I've talked to the sheriff about this, and he said that's a good idea. And of course that captain or chief had to go, oh, okay. You know what I mean? It was like so to let him know, listen, I have a direct link, and you're not going to have a say in this.
It's I dealt with that situation quite a bit, but I do think in this situation, Danny Cello is looking for some kind of absolution, both from the prosecutors and from his friends. This is okay. We understand what you're doing. I think on dealing with somebody who has connections to the top, I've had to deal with that. And this is the way I used to deal with it. I would say, hey, Cliff, I understand you're friends with XYZ, fill in the blank. And that guy has a lot of say in what's going on here. And here's my only challenge for you is if you're going to say something negative about the unit and how it's run, and you've never told me, I will have a problem with you.
Yeah. I got you.
Because if you're going to say that to him, but you're not going to say it to me, now I have a problem with you. But
well, in my example, he did tell, listen, the sheriff thinks this is a good idea. So obviously the guy wasn't going to go against
the
sheriff. Do you think on? Go ahead.
But if you haven't presented that idea to me and given me first right of refusal, right? If you go to the sheriff and undermine me, I might have a problem with that. But at least you told me, right?
Correct.
I'm not going to tell you not to be friends with the sheriff, but if you undermine me or hurt me, I'm going to have a problem with that.
Oh yeah, that wasn't happening. But hey, do you think in this movie here? So remember, he must have realized at this point, because remember that guy, was it Rocco? He gave him an out, right? He goes, listen.
Yeah.
Tomorrow morning, you go to the airport, 75 grand. Once you get there, I'm going to give another 75 grand. And he kind of says to himself, am I going to like live and what am I going to do? So he didn't even want to take that out.
No. Where do I want to go? I mean, I think there is a certain amount of adrenaline you can see with what he's doing, right?
Oh, he loved it. He loved that.
Yeah, I mean, we all know it when you're on the big chase and you take the guy down. There is a certain amount, and I'm not talking not necessarily a car chase, but car chase, foot chase, the adrenaline pump, and all that stuff comes in. But when you're working hard and you make a case, and you could see it, particularly gang investigators when they take down a particular gangster that they go in, homicide guys. I was talking to New York. The NYPD guy, homicide guy, and one case led to another case that he was so proud of in there, and so here he is. The guy's been retired for 20 years, and he's talking about these homicide cases that he worked that he was so proud of, and you can tell there's a lot of adrenaline in success, right? And so he's wearing a wire on these guys. There's a lot of adrenaline with that, but a sense of accomplishment. I took down this crooked defense attorney. I took down this crooked bail bondsman. I'm helping to take down some of these other guys that are working with them, NYPD guys that are really corrupt. I'm a good guy because I was just taking down dope dealers. That's what I was doing. I mean, he's managed to moralize what he was doing, but what these guys was doing was real bad, right? So,
oh man.
But I do think he's trying to get absolution, and he's also, I think there is a certain amount of survival. I want to survive this, and
you're right,
and not go to prison, and I have to do that by cooperating. And when you see what's going on with the Knapp Commission, I have a feeling he's looking at that and he's thinking, they're going to eventually come after all of us. So why don't I be the first to help them out?
I think that's what he was thinking. Yeah.
It doesn't come out that, well, I'm just saving myself. I'm going to work. I think there's a certain amount of self survival going on. There's, he's trying to survive this time, knowing full well that these guys are coming after him. So the next thing is he talks, you deny, and this what I really liked about this. So this scene is Danny Cello meets up with somebody that he early on had given him information and was called the King, and he called him Babyface because actually Cello was much younger than everybody else on his crew. He was like 6 years younger than the youngest other guy, right? And he did have kind of a babyface, so he's called Babyface by this dope dealer, the King, who also gave him information, most likely on his rivals. I think that's the way it worked. Give information on your rivals, take them out of business so you can make more money. And so they have this little bit of confrontation where he's talking to him, and he basically says, the federal marshal there behind him says, well, we're going to have to put him on the list of somebody that we have to find, because the guy's saying, I'm dead broke. I have 5 family members, our kids just like you. I can't afford anything. And he's kind of blaming it on him. And he says, well, he's not a killer, but he's just a talker, but his talk hurts. And it was the comment of the federal marshal here. He says, he talks, you deny. You remember that comment?
Yeah, that was telling.
I think the king is not threatening him. He's trying to justify to him what he's about to do to Cielo. Just like you, just like you are selling your people. I need to sell you. Not that I want. I need you. I need to sell you.
But you're right. So I'm going to undermine you as a witness. In the Bloomberg case and these other cases, I'm going to testify against you. I'm going to destroy your credibility. You did way more than 3 things. You're right, Martin. That's exactly what he's saying.
That's correct. Yeah.
But what does the federal marshal say to him? He says, he talks, you deny.
Ah,
He talks, you deny. So for me, what that meant is these guys all talk. I'm sure the federal marshals talk to the prosecutors involved in the case, and Cello's now there. He's the golden goose that lays the golden eggs in terms of prosecutions for him. Now they got to protect him and keep him alive. And finding out that he's been involved in a lot more corruption via the king is an important thing, right? Because it undermines his credibility. Then you can take that evidence into court and get these convictions overturned. Because they've already convicted Bloomberg, the drug defense attorney, and now they're trying to undermine that case. And this is what's going on. They're getting more information from Danny Cello at this point. Well, what about this and what about that? And the king is the guy. He's the linchpin to undermine Cello because he was also an informant with Cello, and he bought him 3 cars. He bribed him. He gave him stuff. And so he's trying to undermine him. But with that said, to me, that comment, he talks, you deny, is they all knew there was more, that Cello was involved in way more than he ever admitted. And they're okay with him perjuring himself, which is exactly what they went after Bloomberg for. They got him for perjuring people, for bringing people on the stand to perjure themselves and to make evidence to save drug prosecutors. So they're doing exactly the same tune. They're just flipping the script, right? It's them doing it to the defense attorney now, or them doing it to the corrupt system, which do the ends justify the means? And that's a big challenge. What do you think of this? That comment, he talks, you deny. It's an acknowledgement that you have to deny, right?
yeah. I think he's telling him, hey, don't be persuaded by what this guy is saying. He's going to make allegations, and you deny it all the way.
Well, the other thing about him is he takes the king takes a lie detector test, and that's a big part of the scene where Cello's. I don't know if it went down this way. I don't know if I would have had Cello in the room, right? If I was doing this.
Yeah.
But obviously, it makes for some dramatic movie making, right? So they're all there watching as he goes through the lie detector test, and they're saying, "Oh my God, the guy was so calm as he told his story," indicating
truthfulness.
Truthfulness, right? That he was so calm. But the thing about lie detectors, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it, is you can appear to be calm, but the physiological effects of lying get identified by this stuff, even though you feel really, you look like you're calm and you're answering the questions in a relaxed way. But in reality, it's detecting those physiological changes that are typical when a person lies, and they essentially come out with, hey, the king lied throughout this stuff. Here's where he lied. Here's where he's lied. Here's where he lied.
Yeah.
And that was an acknowledgement that Cello was then telling the truth. But in reality, they never put Cello on a lie detector.
That's right.
You don't see that, right? So
no.
So he speaks, he talks, you deny.
You deny. Yeah, I like that.
They have to prove it. Now they got this other short prosecutor here, bald-headed guy. Nothing against short guys, but they all seem to be, a lot of federal prosecutors seem to have a chip on their shoulder, and they're short, right? And he doesn't trust Cello at all. This is the bald guy here, and he wants to prosecute him, and he's getting all this information to undermine Cello because he wants to go after him. He thinks they're, rightly so, that he's as corrupt as everybody else, right? So he survives the king. Now he's got these other prosecutors going after him, and he's like, "Hey, man, I came out of the cold. I helped you guys. You guys are supposed to be my partners, and you're trying to put me in prison, right?" What do you think of that, Cliff? I mean, he takes the risk, but he's got no friends on either side of this.
He's got no friends. Yeah, that was kind of a weird relationship between the two, between the Washington guy and the other prosecutors. Yeah, seemed like they had competing interests. I guess that would lead to their motivations to kind of take each other down a notch, I guess.
Yeah, and I wonder how much, so some of these guys are purists, we can't use anybody that's corrupted, but yet they use corrupt people all the time.
Yeah.
And but they have to admit their corruption, and Cello clearly didn't admit it. They smelled a rat and they were going after him. But the other guys that he initially worked with, they had become friendly with him, and they understood this. And later on, they end up having this big powwow where they're going to decide whether they're going to prosecute Cello or not, and they choose not to prosecute him, right? Because he had done such good, and he came out of the cold. He came to them without any liabilities, meaning he wasn't being prosecuted and rolled like they were trying to do to Gino, right? Like they try to do these other cops. And again, of course, he sticks to, I'm not going to give up my partners. And here's where the French Connection thing comes in, right? So along the way, while this stuff is going on, the Knapp Commission is going on, and they're doing all this stuff, somebody is stealing heroin taken in the French Connection case.
Yeah.
And it's getting to the mafia, and the mafia is selling it, right? And this starts, this is where the feds are just pissed. And I don't blame them, right? Because it displays a level of arrogance. Like, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
And it does end up being people who are part of the SIU group, these major narcotics teams, but it wasn't any of his partners. It wasn't him, right? But the feds are, hey, we're going after everybody. We're getting whatever we can. We're taking everybody down. If you took a pack of cigarettes from a store, we're going to prosecute you to get you to roll on everybody else. They're playing hardball now. All the deals are off. Your partners aren't safe. We're going after everybody, and that includes you, right? I mean, that's what they're doing. And there's an interesting story. One of the guys I interviewed yesterday, he told me, he goes, you know how they figured out that the dope was not coke, is there was ants in the evidence locker room, because they were replacing it with flour, I think, or something like that.
Yeah,
the ants were eating the flour because it wasn't coke, right? They wouldn't eat coke,
Right.
But they were eating the flour. Why do we have ants?
That's interesting. I never heard that.
And he goes, I don't know if it's true, but that's what I was told. And I go, well, I got to tell that story. But
that makes sense.
So then they started to check it out and go, oh my God, this is all flour, or mostly flour. There's no heroin. I'm sorry, it was heroin left in it. So, and that's how they found out. And he said, yeah, a lot of those SIU guys were corrupt. Now they're gone, right? They're gone. We don't have them now. You got the DEA task force tends to work with NYPD and do the dope. So you get the feds and those guys working together. But I can understand if I was a federal prosecutor and I found out that they were stealing evidence out of the locker room and working with the mafia to sell it. It would be scorched earth for me too. I guess I don't blame them on that one, and it does show the arrogance, the arrogance of the corruption. Had you heard that?
No, but I'm surprised they didn't offer him immunity at any time, because that's, like you say, it came down to that one meeting with all the prosecutors. Like, are we going to charge this guy? And so they never offered him immunity to get him to open up more. I guess maybe because he was sticking with the three things, they wanted to hold it over his head. I don't understand that.
I think they did not want to have to say, well, were you offered immunity for your testimony? They had put him on there saying that was only three. And I think when Bloomberg finally got an appeal, they did find out that he'd done some other than the three things. He started acknowledging that he was giving informants heroin, which, according to my contacts, did happen.
Yeah.
Right. And they were giving heroin to informants just to help them out, but also to get to take down some major scores, because they would get good information. And then that was part of the culture, that was okay.
Yeah,
even though
that's right,
technically it was illegal, it was tolerated and it was allowed. And I can't believe that the senior management didn't know that and understand that. So I place a lot of blame on them. But they tolerated, they went along with it because they got the big bus, they got to stand in front of 100 pounds of heroin, say, look what we did, we're saving everybody. But he does, because of the pressure of this French Connection. And just to clarify, the French Connection was a scheme to smuggle heroin from Asia to Italy into New York, and it was via France, and that's why they call it the French Connection, via France, and some folks here in New York that were part of it. And Gene Hackman plays in the movie The French Connection, which we'll eventually do one of these days. And it was a major score. It was the busting up a major heroin ring, and so it was really good police work. And then to have it getting ripped off out of the evidence locker by the PD was it was offensive. It was a black mark for the NYPD, and it made the federal prosecutors, look ineffectual in dealing with corruption in the city. And so I kind of agree with their frustration, and this forces them to have to give up his partners. Nobody's safe after this. Everybody's going down. And in reality, he had to give them up because they were, by taking everybody down on SIU, and he said that we're going to get everybody down and they're going to say that you did stuff. And eventually he begins to come clean, not with this guy here who really didn't like him, but with some of the other prosecutors that he was working with. And they attempted to use this exculpatory evidence to get Bloomberg out. And the judge says, if you remember that scene, the judge says, this is all, they have a good case on you. That's all secondary information. It's not necessary. I affirm the conviction, and he lost his appeal.
Yeah.
Today, that would be, oh my God, the guy lying on the stand. That would not happen. But at the time, and it kind of shows the corrupt system. At the time, they said, well, yeah, this happened, but they still got a good case. They don't have a good case on you. They got a great case on you. I forget how he said that. We had him good.
Yeah.
We don't have you good. We have you great.
Yeah.
And they had a good case on him, and he lost on appeal, even though they found out Danny Cello was corrupt. And so, did you remember that scene where the judges nowadays that everybody would be getting prosecuted? They wouldn't, but they gave him a pass. They gave Cello a pass.
Cello was concerned about it too, because they were bringing out all these things in the court, and so you could tell by looking at it, he was just like, "Oh my God! I mean, we're going to lose this now." And when the judge made that, when he made his announcement, man, Cello was just like ecstatic. Yeah.
Well, now this guy, this bald short guy, he did say something that I think is important, and he says to him, he says, cops want to admit guilt.
Yeah.
Cops want to admit guilt. That's why you're here.
Yeah,
that's why
I remember
you're here.
that. That was powerful.
Cops want to admit guilt, and I think it's right at this point where he says that. But cops want to admit guilt, and they want to feel like they were on the right side of thing, and they want to acknowledge that. And as this time goes on, a lot of these guys say, I don't ever want to have to investigate cops again, because it's so much trauma, right? So, he ends up giving up his partner, right? And he ends up talking to Gus Levy and he ends up telling him slowly that he's going to give them up. And he ends up talking about his crimes. And one of the guys kills himself, right? He lets Gus Levy know, one of the partners know, hey, Danny's talking, he's giving us up. Then he goes to meet with Gus, and then he blows his brains out from the building that Gus is coming out of, right?
Yeah.
And they say that in the book, they say that as you research the story, that people did commit suicide, right? They were facing the realities of their situation. One of the guys involved, he refused. They talk about him. He wouldn't be in the room when they were doing the theft. He would be the guy outside, right? And he said, you tell me to do this, you tell me to do that. I never wanted to be corrupted, but everybody got a slice of the action. I gave all my money to the church. He didn't keep it. Remember that scene? That was his way of absolution.
Yes. Yeah. That's how he justified. Yeah. I didn't take it personally. Yeah.
Yeah. So he does end up talking about his other crimes, and they do end up prosecuting like 70 people on the NYPD. They prosecute prosecutors, judges, bail bondsmen. All these folks get prosecuted, but Cello survives.
Yeah.
They have this meeting, and they talk about whether they're going to prosecute him or not. And there's a lot of emotion back and forth on whether they're truly going to prosecute him. And they decide, even though he's dirty, they acknowledge, we knew he was dirtier than he was letting on. We knew, we went along with this, but he came in to us.
Right.
If we prosecute him, you're never going to have a police officer ever come to us again.
That's correct.
Come forward to again. And so they face this challenge. Well, we either give him a pass, or we prosecute him and risk never having any police officers come forward again.
Right.
Ever again. And so they did face this dilemma. To me, it's like it's that ends justifies the mean. That we decided the ends justify the mean, so we ignored it. And yet that's the same thing that the police officers got involved in. The ends justify the mean. We had to do these things to take these big dealers down. Now they got corrupt and took money too. But for them, the ends justify the mean. They say it. Hey, what happens if you tax a Colombian, you take all his money, he got a fine, and you send him back to Colombia? He knows, don't come to New York to sell your stuff, because we're just going to steal your money, right?
Right.
So did the ends justify the means? No, probably not in that case. But the federal prosecutors faced that challenge too, and they decided that the ends did justify the means.
They did,
so
yeah.
Are they that much better? Just Harvard educated, Yale educated, Ivy League educated folks going after blue collar cops? What do you think? I think you agree with that premise?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, well, I mean, it was just parallels and kind of both. And when it comes right down to it, I mean, I guess they believe that they were trying to hold cops accountable for corruption. But like you said, if you look at their own hierarchy of their culture, they were doing some of the same things that were not morally correct.
Well, yeah, not legally corrupt and the same kind of thinking.
Both,
crept in.
yeah.
The same kind of thinking crept in. Well, the ends justify the means. Given the hype, some heroin to get through the night justified the means. Giving them a little bit of money justified the means. Taking a little bit of money because the Colombians won't come back if we do that justifies the means.
Yeah,
so, and the feds, knowingly put witnesses on who are perjuring themselves justified the means. So it is the ends justify the means, and the question is where. If we're going to be a nation of laws, then that thinking has to not prevail, but yet it prevails on all levels of justice here for everybody involved. And I think, hey Martin, how much time do I have left?
Like 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay, good. Okay, so the last one of the last scenes is, you just roll right into it, Martin, is the academy scene. So he goes to the academy. The prosecutions have happened and are happening, and he testified for 2 years. He was held hidden somewhere so nobody can get him. They did try to get a hit on him. His cousin was supposed to be somebody that hit him, and he refused to do it. Of course, he ended up dead because the mafiosos were going down. And he's in, a lot of his his buddies have been prosecuted now and are off the force, and they sent him to the academy. There's a comment here. Thanks, Chief and Cliff and Martin. Good talk. Have to go now. Take it easy and be well, everybody. Well, thank you, Cam. And anyway, so he's now teaching in the academy, and he's going to teach undercover tactics to these guys. And one of these detectives said, "Are you the cello? Is that you?" He goes, "Well, my name is this." And he says, "I don't have anything to learn from you." And he walks out, and and that's kind of reasonable. I think the guys I talked to yesterday, the NYPD guys, they said, "Hey, he was part of that, and a lot of and he survived all that." They did not have a lot of positive things to say about. They agreed that the department needed to be cleaned up, but they saw him as being a big part of it. And they feel like he got a pass, and so I guess that does happen when you do these things. But there was a lot of negative feelings towards him in particular. What you think of? Do you think? I don't think he should have kept his job. I mean, hey, go count paperclips somewhere, but you're not going to teach people. How do you take a guy who's corrupt and have him teach people? That's what I thought about this scene.
Well, you kind of noticed that I guess these detectives were probably sent there to take this class along with the academy cadets, I guess, because the academy cadets, they show them kind of interesting that the cadets are there and they're interested in, they're just sitting there, but these seasoned detectives are going, "Hey, we're out of here. We're not going to learn nothing from you. We refuse to."
Well, I hate to interrupt it, but
okay,
we have reached the end of the show.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thanks,
remember
Chief.
to like us on YouTube. Cliff, stick around for the debrief.
Will do.
And Martin, go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Those sons of bitches. Ma, I'm doing a show.